Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really interesting question. What's actually behind the controversy surrounding potential side effects, neuropsychiatric ones, from polyethylene glycol 3350? You know, the stuff many people know as Mirror-X, especially in kids.
Exactly. And we're going to be diving into a specific study from 2019 published in GastroHep.
Yep.
It really tried to get to the bottom of where these concerns came from and, how widespread they actually became.
Right. So our mission here for this deep dive is to really understand the quality of that study. How solid was their approach in uncovering the sort of origins of these worries?
Yeah, what can we legitimately take away from their findings? We're looking at the main paper plus some supplementary materials they provided.
And for you listening, especially if you appreciate getting up to speed on things quickly but also thoroughly, look at how perceptions around a common medication can shift. Well, it should be pretty insightful.
Definitely. It touches on a lot of relevant themes today.
Okay, so where does this study start? It seems like they first confirmed that, yes, there is a real hesitation among parents and caregivers about using PEG for their kids.
That's right. That was a key starting point. They did a survey polling pediatric gastroenterologists.
Right, the specialists.
Exactly. And they found something like two-thirds, roughly 66%, reported that parents had either flat out refused to start PEG treatment for their child.
Wow.
Or they'd asked to stop it after starting. So it immediately signals this isn't just a niche concern, it's pretty widespread.
Okay, so that establishes the problem space, kind of. Parents are wary. Yeah. How did the study try to figure out why? What's driving it?
Well, they dug into the data. Specifically, they looked at the FDA's Adverse Event Reporting System, ARS.
ARS, right?
Yeah.
That's where doctors, patients, anyone really, can report a potential side effect they think might be linked to a drug.
Precisely. It's like a big surveillance database. They analyzed reports related to PEG in children from 2007 all the way through 2017.
And what did that data show? Were the numbers significant?
They were pretty striking, actually. They identified over 1,500 adverse symptoms reported in just over 600 children.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. Almost 59% of those reported symptoms were neurological.
Neurological.
And then they drilled down even further. Within those neurological reports, nearly 84% were specifically neuropsychiatric.
Ah, so things like...
Things like anxiety, anger, aggression, abnormal behavior, that kind of cluster of symptoms.
That really quantifies the types of concerns being reported, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Did they see any patterns in who was reporting these issues, like age or gender?
They did. They noted some interesting trends. Reports mentioning affective disorders, think mood swings, maybe depression, were more common in girls, particularly between 6 and 10 years old.
Okay.
Whereas reports that mentioned autism spectrum disorder were more frequently associated with boys, especially those under 5 years old.
Interesting. So we have this documented parental aversion.
Yeah.
And we have these specific neuropsychiatric symptoms being reported to the FDA database. But the study didn't stop there, right? They wanted to understand the trigger for this heightened concern.
Exactly. They suspected something else might be fueling it beyond just individual experiences.
Yeah.
And a really key finding points towards the media and the internet.
How so?
Well, they found this really strong temporal correlation. Basically, the timing lined up perfectly.
Lined up between what?
Between media reports, news stories about anecdotal cases of these neuropsychiatric side effects hitting the news, specifically around February 2017.
Okay, I remember seeing some headlines around then.
Right, and immediately following those reports, they saw a massive spike in Google searches related to PEG side effects, Mirror-X side effects, things like that.
So the news hits, and people instantly go online looking for more information, or maybe seeing if others had similar experiences.
That's exactly what it looks like. And this wasn't just like a random blip. The timing was spot on, and it was geographically concentrated within the U.S., aligning with where the media reports were circulating.
Did the study show this visually?
Yes, they have a chart, figure 3C, that really illustrates it. You can see some previous smaller bumps in internet interest about PEG, but nothing like the surge after February 2017.
And did that increased interest die down quickly?
Not entirely. That's another key point. While the initial spike was huge, the baseline level of internet searches about PEG 3350 side effects actually remained higher after those reports than it was before. It sustained.
Huh. So the conversation, or at least the online searching, stayed elevated.
Yes. And this led the study authors to make a really important connection. They basically proposed a chain of events.
Which was?
They suggested that this negative public perception, which was initially triggered by the media reporting, got amplified by all the subsequent internet activity, people searching, sharing, discussing online. And that combination, they argue, is what likely led to more people reporting issues to the FDA's ARS system and also fueled more parents refusing the medication.
So the perception itself became a driver. Do they actually state that?
They do. They explicitly say, and I'm quoting loosely here, that it appears that negative public perception triggered by media reporting and amplified by internet activity has resulted in increased AER reporting and parental refusal of PEG.
Wow. That's a strong statement about the power of media and online narratives in shaping health decisions.
It really is. It highlights how perceptions can sometimes outpace or at least run parallel to the established scientific evidence.
Okay, this is fascinating, but now we need to talk about the study itself. How legitimate is this conclusion? Let's get into their methodology. How do they actually do this research? What was their approach?
Good question. It's crucial for evaluating their claims. They used a multi-pronged approach, which is generally a good sign. They relied on three main data sources.
All right, let's recap those.
First, the FDA AERS data. We already discussed the adverse event reports.
Okay.
Second, the internet search data, primarily from Google Search and Google Trends, to track public interest over time.
Got it.
And third, that survey of pediatric gastroenterologists we mentioned earlier to get the clinical perspective on parental attitudes and refusals.
So 3 different angles.
Yeah.
And they didn't just look at them separately.
No, the key was integrating them. Especially the timeline analysis, looking at how the peaks in media reports, internet searches, and AERS reporting coincided. That correlation was central to their argument.
And the survey, how did they conduct that? Just send out emails?
It was a bit more structured. They used SurveyMonkey, distributed it via a professional bulletin board for pediatric GIs, and also used emails and some phone calls to reach out. Standard survey methods, basically.
Okay. And what about analyzing all this data? Did they use sophisticated statistics?
They used appropriate methods for this kind of observational data. Descriptive statistics, obviously, just to summarize the AERS reports. Then they used chi-squared tests. Those help determine if an observed association, like between a symptom and a demographic group, is likely real or just due to chance.
Okay.
And importantly, they use something called the Benjamin-Hochberg procedure.
That sounds complex. What's that for?
It's basically a way to control for false positives when you're running lots of statistical tests like they were doing with the AERS data. It makes it less likely that you'll claim a connection exists when it's really just random noise. So it suggests they were trying to be careful, methodologically speaking.
Right, adding a layer of rigor. But like any study, especially one using this kind of real-world data, there must be limitations, right? Did the authors acknowledge those?
Oh, absolutely. They were quite upfront about the limitations of each data source, which actually strengthens the paper, in my view.
Okay, so what were the main caveats? Let's start with the AERS data.
Well, AERS is known to have biases. It's voluntary reporting, so you get underreporting of some things, maybe overreporting of others if they're in the news, what they call reporting bias or stimulated reporting.
Like the media attention could have directly caused more reports, regardless of a real increase in side effects.
Exactly. That's a classic issue. Also, the reports often lack detailed clinical information. They aren't usually verified by medical professionals, and there's typically no follow-up to see the long-term outcome. It flags potential signals, but doesn't prove causation.
Okay, so AERS gives clues, not definitive answers. What about the internet search data?
The limitation there is that it's a pretty blunt tool. It shows that people were searching and when, but not why, or what information they found, or how reliable that information was. It just indicates a level of public interest or concern.
Right. Just because someone searches Miralax side effects doesn't mean their child actually experienced one.
Precisely. And finally, the survey of doctors.
What were the potential issues there?
Well, like many surveys, there's potential for sampling bias. Maybe the doctors who felt most strongly about the issue, one way or the other, were more likely to respond.
Makes sense.
And critically, much of what the doctors reported about neuropsychiatric symptoms was based on what parents told them, rather than the doctor's own direct, confirmed observations in every case. So it reflects parental reporting and concern, which is valuable but still indirect in some ways.
So putting all these limitations together,
Yeah.
what did the study authors ultimately conclude about the legitimacy of the link between PEG and these neuropsychiatric effects? Did they say PEG causes them?
No, they were very careful not to say that. That's a crucial takeaway.
Okay.
They concluded that the caregiver aversion is definitely real, and it seems strongly linked to the influence of media and internet activity.
Oh.
But, the scientific validity of a direct causal link between PEG itself and these specific neuropsychiatric symptoms remains unclear. The data they used, with all its limitations, simply can't prove that. They stress the need for more specific, prospective, long-term studies designed explicitly to answer that question.
So there's a disconnect. We see the worry, we see the media link, but the biological proof isn't there in this data.
Exactly. And remember that interesting finding from the survey? While 2/3 of doctors reported parents refusing PEG, a much smaller percentage of those same doctors recalled personally observing these specific neuropsychiatric side effects frequently.
Right, that gap is telling. It emphasizes the power of perception and reported concerns, which might not always align perfectly with clinical observation frequency.
It does. It really highlights what this study can tell us about the dynamics of public perception and reporting, and what it cannot tell us definitively about biological causation.
Okay, and just for context, because this might seem like it came out of nowhere, PEG 3350, Mural Annex, it's not some new experimental drug, is it?
Not at all. That's important background. The study introduction actually mentions this. PEG is a very well-established, widely used treatment for constipation in children.
And generally considered safe and effective based on previous studies.
Yes, numerous studies prior to this controversy had established its efficacy and a generally favorable safety profile for its intended use in treating constipation. That's precisely why this level of parental concern and refusal became such a significant issue for pediatric gastroenterologists.
It provides that crucial context for why this whole situation is notable. A commonly used, generally trusted medication suddenly facing intense scrutiny based on anecdotal reports amplified online.
Exactly.
So let's try to wrap this up. What's the big takeaway from this deep dive into the study?
I think the key takeaway is how it highlights a significant public health challenge. Perception, heavily swayed by media narratives and online amplification, can dramatically impact the use of a common medical treatment.
Even when robust scientific evidence confirming those specific feared side effects is, let's say, still developing or lacking.
Precisely. The study shows the perception of risk became very real and had tangible consequences, like parents refusing treatment potentially driven more by communication patterns than by established biological mechanisms, at least based on the evidence reviewed here.
And the study's method, while clever in correlating different data streams, also serves as a reminder of the limitations, right? We can't just take AERS reports or Google Trends at face value to prove cause and effect.
Absolutely. It underscores the difficulty of drawing firm conclusions from these kinds of observational, real-world data sources alone. They're valuable for generating hypotheses and tracking trends, but usually need confirmation from more rigorous study designs.
So maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on.
Yeah, this case really makes you think, doesn't it? How do we, as individuals navigating health information online, weigh anecdotal evidence against broader scientific consensus?
Right.
Especially when it involves our kids.
Right. And what's the responsibility here? For media outlets reporting these stories or for the online platforms where these discussions get amplified? How do they shape these crucial health perceptions?
It's a complex question with no easy answers, but this study definitely puts it front and center.
A really potent example of medicine in the digital age. If you're keen to explore more, definitely look for any further research on the long-term safety of PEG in children and keep thinking critically about how online information shapes health choices.
Sound advice.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.